ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you now to put your hands together for my boss, co-CEO and co-founder, that's right, this is what's about to happen, of Benjamin's Desk, Jen Mayer, and from Dreamit, Miss Karen Griffith Gryga.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you so much, Karen, for being with us here tonight. I feel like that's a really hard act to follow. We don't have any music planned during our chat, and there was
nor dance moves. You don't want to say that.
I don't know. Maybe we'll be spontaneous at the end. And
I can do White Girl Overbite.
But we're going to try to keep the energy up and go off that. Just a few housekeeping things. If you can, hold your questions till the end. If something is just killing you that you have to jump in on, I will welcome that, but try to just hold them to the end. I will reserve plenty of time so that everybody can ask a few questions at the end. Again, thank you, Karen. One of the things that we're going to do sort of here is just lay out a roadmap, and we're going to talk about past, present, and future. And I think that's important sometimes to think about the past, because the why and the how of how you got to this seat today and how you got to Dreamit and how that position came to be is really important. So we're going to go way back and start at the beginning. You grew up in the Philadelphia region, and you were lucky enough in the 8th grade to be a computer programmer and start on that path, which is few and far between, I think, for a lot of people today.
Especially back then.
But that set you on the course of what you were going to do, and you really stuck to that and took to that, and then went on to major in that in college. Can you talk a little bit about how that was such an important piece of your life to sort of set you on the trajectory of why you're sitting here now?
Yeah, half the battle in life is exposure, right? Exposure to different experiences, exposure to different opportunities. And so, as Jen said, I had the opportunity in 8th grade to be part of a program where the leader of the program encouraged us to start computer programming. So this was just at the very beginning of time with PCs, and I was, very math-oriented. And so, at that point in time, I was like, wow, this is cool. I love this. And it wasn't, girls don't do that. It was there and it was cool. And so I was lucky in high school because it was never a question for me what I was going to do. I enjoyed it, and so I kind of knew that I was going to go into computer programming. So I was fascinated by the technology early on.
And when you finished college, didn't go straight to grad school right away, didn't go to a startup, in fact went to the opposite of a startup and worked for a multi-billion-dollar company in the defense area. So you're doing computer programming, involved in the engineering world, and surrounded by a lot of females? No?
Not really. Not really. And certainly not blonde females either. So, I'd love to say I had some sort of master grand plan. I mean, we meet some of the entrepreneurs in Dreamit, and we're like, okay, what the heck were we doing at 18? So for me, at that point in time, going into college and coming into college, I was fascinated by the technology. I was fascinated by the process of software programming. And I really had no grand plan for my life. It was like, I know how to program in 10 languages. What can I do with this? So I did, get recruited into a defense contracting position. It required what's called an EBI, which was extensive background investigation, which was a lot of fun because here I am graduating college, and there's FBI talking to my neighbors and friends, and they're like, what did Karen do? Right? But it was the reason why I took the job was because, as we see now in some of our startups, the DoD in a lot of cases is leading edge with tech. So at that point in time, it was a really weird environment when I think back on it, because I had to go through 3 cipher codes in order to get into the building. So, but they were doing the latest in not only mainframes, but also workstations and databases. So for me, it was all about the tech and learning the tech.
But at some point you realized that there was going to be a next step for you.
Yeah.
Right. So you're at this company and working and realize that grad school is going to be the next step for you. We're able to pull you back to the hometown of Philadelphia for grad school. But you got 2 degrees at the same time from 2 different schools at Penn, which is a feat in and of itself. But what was the value that you saw and the foresight that you were able to have at that time that both of those degrees would be important, not just an MBA from Wharton and not just a master's in computer science?
So I'm a Gemini, so I like everything. So I couldn't decide. So I knew I wanted to go back and get an MBA because here I was coming out of a liberal arts school. William & Mary was where I went undergrad. And I was so focused, as a computer science major. So I knew coming out that I wanted to go to business school because I realized I didn't have that exposure. So I did take like the GMAT on the last day possible, spring semester, senior year, going, I know I want to go back to school. I want to take this. And so then I went and worked for TRW, and I was lucky because I got lots of opportunities. My boss was actually a female at the time, and so she kept pushing me into these opportunities, and I was like, okay. So I was running a $2 million software release that affected, so we were running a 24/7 national security system. So this touched the entire community, this software project. And so I'm running this project, and I wanted to interview for a management position at TRW. And they were like, no, you're too young. I'm like, I'm running a software project that affects the entire community. It's a $2 million project, but I'm too young. So I was like, I think now's the time to go back to grad school. And I was like, do I want an MBA? Do I want computer science? I think I want both. So then I did research, and there was only 2 schools in the country that offered that opportunity, and Penn was one and Stanford was the other. So it was a no-brainer to come back to Penn. So,
and then the path changes, and the winding path continues to where you are now. But when you got in and focusing on what you were doing and thinking that you were actually going to end up back on the West Coast or have the entrepreneur bug at this time and think you're going to start your own startup, but wind up getting recruited into venture capitalists and becoming an investor immediately out of grad school.
Yeah. So, again, I've been lucky. Can't say it's been, as you know, life is a winding road. The one thing that I've never been afraid of is keeping my mind open to possibilities. And when an opportunity presents itself, even though I'm scared out of my mind sometimes, I'm like, all right, I'll give it a go. So I was interviewing on the West Coast for my vision coming out of grad school was to go into business development for a high-tech company and then go into a startup route. Now, again, my fascination was still on the technology, right? I was more sophisticated about the entire business process coming out of Wharton, but as all of you guys probably know here, studying it in school versus doing it are very different. So I wanted to build my network through a business development role and then go into the startup world. But because I had the computer science and the MBA, I got recruited into venture capital. And the opportunity to work with so many great companies and learn all these different businesses and business models, I was like, okay. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. And literally, I had some time to, I started working right away after undergrad, but after grad, they were like, let's start in June. I'm like, how about September? So I got the opportunity to travel a lot that summer. But I literally had an upset stomach for about 6 weeks. And I was like, what's wrong with me? I'd volunteered in Belize. Did I pick up a tapeworm in Belize? Like, what's wrong with me? It was nerves. It was all nerves. The first day I started in the new job, it went away. So,
well, to pick up on something you were saying, you had this attitude of, let's just go do it and we'll figure it out. And I've heard people say that entrepreneurs aren't necessarily risk takers, but that they have a high tolerance for uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you do in that situation of having the nerves and having the mindset of, I'm just going to go tackle this and I'm going to go do it? But that's easier said than done. Did you surround yourself with the right people? Were there mentors that you reached out to? Did you do personal reflection? How are you able to get through those moments? Because I'm sure it's not the first or last time that it happened.
Yeah, I'm a talker, so I'm always talking to everybody. So there was a lot of people at Wharton that wanted to get into venture capital. So I talked to them about what they knew, what they didn't know, talked to the professors, read. For me, it's more the attitude. Like, yes, I was nervous, but I just kept thinking about all these cool companies that I was going to get to work with. So for me, it's just literally fake it until you make it. Literally. So, I talk to as many people as I can, and I find that even today, when I'm trying to solve a problem or when I'm trying to explore an opportunity. And in fact, we just did this with urban tech. Dreamit just announced launching a new vertical in urban tech. And, Mo and Mike from Dreamit are in the back of the room. We were all reading articles and looking through databases and like doing this analysis. And I go, wait a minute, guys, we got to do primary calls, right? So we did probably, 60, 70 primary calls and just talk to people, and get insights. And even though I have a lot of experience, I always just ask 10 million questions and talk to people. And when you start to get engaged in the subject matter and you start to get passionate about learning and figuring out and pursuing something, the nerves just kind of go to the background.
And did you feel like being a young, blonde female, as you mentioned, in the venture capital world, that you were looked at differently or had different experiences? And then how did you react to some of those situations? And how would you be able to advise our audience on how to react in some of those situations?
So, number one, when I got into venture, I was always the only female, right? So literally it would be break time and, the men would go right and I would go left and be like, I'll see you in a couple of minutes, But my orientation to life has been always one of openness and curiosity, right? So at the board meetings, I just saddled right up to the table. I don't, step back at all. I saddled up to the table, even though I was the youngest one in the room and the only female in the room. Just ask questions, right? So for me, at the board meetings, always come prepared. Always come prepared, right? But then just start asking questions and engaging. So the advice that I have is, even if you don't feel confident, fake it till you make it. You put your shoulders back, you put your superwoman pose on, and you go after it. And then just be open and ask questions. And, and if you're ever in doubt, start asking people about themselves, because people always love talking about themselves. So, right? So once you start cracking that egg and you have an open and honest curiosity, it tends to pave the way. But, do your homework, right? I wasn't going to sit there and lecture a CEO about sales and marketing when I knew nothing about sales and marketing, right? So it was also kind of understanding where you could add value and where you could just ask questions that would be useful in starting the conversation.
What do you do in those situations where you have your superwoman suit on and you're fully prepared for the board meeting and you come in and there's 3 other men in the room and they ask you to go make a cup of coffee for them because they don't think that you're supposed to be there or that you're supposed to be in that environment? How do you directly handle those sorts of situations?
Yes, I have had that circumstance, and I tend to have a couple of different reactions. One, I look at them, I go, oh yeah, the coffee's right over there, and I walk away. Or I just pretend that I don't hear it, right? And just kind of ignore it and move on. Or just, like I said, saddle up to the table and say, yeah, coffee would be great, So for me, there's been lots of uncomfortable situations in my life, and I tend to handle it with humor, right? So I don't get angry, I don't get upset, I just, I play dumb, which people are very willing to accept, or I handle it with humor. So it's we were doing this game one time of two truths and a lie at Dreamit, and my truths were I have a master's in computer science, I snowboard, and I'm from California. Well, everybody said the master's in computer science was false, and I really wanted to flip every one of them the bird. Like, seriously? So, yeah.
So just going back a little bit to your path in the history, you're in the venture capital world now. You're making investments, but you still have this little bug gnawing at you about going to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So you jump to the other side of the pond, and how did you make that leap? I'm sure the timing is never perfect of when you think about doing that, and then how were you able to use your venture capital experience to become an entrepreneur yourself?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because, once I became an investor, and especially when you're an early stage investor, you always have the pull of the bug, like, oh, I could do that, that would be cool, But I was really enjoying the investing part and the working with multiple teams. One of my biggest kind of mantras is life is I never want to be driven by fear, ever. And it's kind of oxymoronic because part of me says if you're not afraid, you're not pushing yourself enough. But saying I don't want fear to hold me back. So here I had been in VC for 13 years, and all the VCs I most admired and mentors of mine had all been previous entrepreneurs. I was like, I haven't done that. I want to do that. I'm going to do it. So I literally just kind of decided. It wasn't any one thing. It was like, okay, I've done this. This is cool. I've enjoyed it, but I want to do this. And so I started up a company. It's called Lipstick Wisdom. And it was at the time when communities were big on the internet. And the idea was for a peer-to-peer environment where women could help women with practical, actionable advice, ideally video-based. And so where I started was an area of personal passion and need, which is mothers of children with neurological differences, because I have a son with neurological differences. And it was great. I was, building the company up and learning. I love when I meet VCs that have never been entrepreneurs, and they're like, oh, you should do this. And I'm like, have you ever been awake at 3 a.m. for 4 months straight because you're worried about product market fit or paying your employees? Go do that and then come back. There is a real difference between investing and doing. So it was a great learning experience. The business model shifted on me, and I ended up shutting the company down for a couple of reasons. So I kind of got my butt kicked royally, and it was a really good learning experience. I learned a lot, but I learned a lot just by doing. There's a big difference, as you guys know, between talking about something and actually doing it.
What did you learn during that experience about the people that you were working with, or building a team, being a sole founder, being a co-founder, and all the dynamics that come with that?
I learned everybody has their personal preference and style. To me, I learned that, culturally, I'm about full transparency. And I'm about, high-performing execution, right? So it's our culture at Dreamit. It's called GSD. GSDs are culture, get shit done. And there's a lot of people out there that talk about GSD, but they don't actually GSD. So I learned a lot about figuring out people and how they actually work before you hire them, because you think, oh, I'll hire someone, if they don't work out, they don't work out. But it's actually can be 6 to 12 months, right? A bad hire is really, really difficult. So I figured a lot about how to figure out people before hiring them, which is really important. But that communication, and that, for me, building a team that fully understands what's going on and works together. Not be afraid to be a leader, but have that collaboration, that communication. And, you really can't figure things out in isolation. Whenever I think, I've got the best answer, and then I go and talk to people about it and get their input and feedback, it's like, oh, yeah, that's better. So it's that the understanding people. We all look at someone. I think we all do this. We look at someone, we talk to them for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and we think that we get them, right? Based upon their resume, their job history, how they present themselves. You have to dig. You really, really have to dig.
And Charlotte mentioned that females have a lot of disadvantages being in the entrepreneur world, but I would view something that you said more as an advantage of females being able to do that digging and being information gatherers, and sometimes having that female intuition in building your team and trying to figure out the people that can get shit done versus the people that just say that they're going to get it done. Is that something that you feel like could be an advantage because you're a female, that you're able to rely on some gut feelings or the ways you're able to ask questions?
Well, these gross generalizations are always tough. So, I'm probably going to offend people in the audience, but that's okay. I do so all the time anyway. I find in general women are much stronger in the empathetic field, right? So one of the things that I think is a strength of women is that we understand other people a little bit more, and we are interested in understanding them a little bit more holistically. What makes them tick? Why are they here? What'll make them happy? And I think we have an advantage in that aspect of really looking at people holistically and driving them to greater things and greater success because of that.
So you shut down that company, start another company? How are you able to look at failures and mistakes that you made in that first company and launching it into the second company or taking a pivot?
Well, the first thing I learned is that, failure sucks, but it's not a big deal, right? It's like at the time you think, oh God, I'm so embarrassed. This is really terrible. But you're like, you know what? Life is a series of turns and winding roads, and take what you learn from it and go on, and you can brush yourself off and go on. So kind of, it wasn't, starting a second company, I was like, okay. I heard it once at some event that's called the one wine bottle rule, right? So when you get knocked down, you drink one bottle of wine, you cry, put a time limit on it, maybe an hour or two, and then you brush yourself off and get back up. So, it's the one bottle of wine rule.
That's a good tip. I'll remember that tip for the future. So you have this entrepreneur bug, you're chugging along at your new company, and you're still in Philadelphia, which I think is an important thing to note, that after grad school, Karen has stayed in Philadelphia to this day, which I think is a huge attribute to Philadelphia, and part of the reason that our region has success that we do now is because you personally have been able to stay here and guide some of these processes. But somebody reaches out, a company reaches out and wants to scoop you up, and you end up coming to Dreamit. And that was sort of a worlds colliding. It's a different type of accelerator. It's different than being a venture capitalist. It's different than being an entrepreneur. But this had all the bells and whistles that you were looking for, and luckily for us, still based right here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, so I was in the process of building the second company with a partner and David Bookspan came knocking. Hey, Karen, we think we want to raise a fund for Dreamit. What do I need to know? And I'm like, well, okay, I'll help you along. So I was just kind of providing advice and input, and over, they sucked me in, Gretchen smiling, they sucked me in to be a mentor when, we had mentors back then, so I was mentoring companies, and, then they said, well, we want to raise this fund and we want to do it with you. And because it was the hands-on work with the entrepreneurs through the accelerator, plus the fund side, I told you I was a Gemini. It was everything I loved in one place, and I'm like, yes, this is awesome. So, and, the team at Dreamit's fabulous. And, I really joined because, it was a team of entrepreneurs. It was a team that had built things from the scratch, from the ground up, and they're having a real impact on the companies that they worked with and the industries, and it's just like, this will be great. This will be a lot of fun.
And one of the best things that I think Dreamit's done is focusing on different industries and different verticals, but also focusing on different demographics. Dreamit Athena came to be a few years ago, and we talked a little bit about the genesis of that and the idea formation and doing some research on what you could do based on being at Dreamit for a couple of years and what you were seeing happen in the venture capital world. And I'm hoping that you can share some of that with our audience, because I think that will be tremendously important to them.
Yeah, so I've always been a little bit of a bull in a china shop, right? It's like, I didn't share this with you, but not only was I a software programmer, I was an operating systems software programmer. They're like, no women did that. And so I've always been like, head down and just do it. So, at Dreamit, kind of looking at, the industry was starting to look at what percentage of female founders do we have. And, my worldview had always been one of meritocracy. Do a good job, everything else will come. But then with the talk about female founders and the discrepancy in the numbers in the industry, I started digging into the numbers. And I got pissed off, right? Because, some of the generics were, women aren't starting as many businesses, or women don't know the numbers, or women aren't as aggressive. And the fact is, women are starting 50% of all businesses. But usually they are coming out of, Babson Center for Women or some institution like that. And, a couple of years ago, you have a first round that says, okay, we studied our portfolio, and guess what? Female founders are our top performers. And it was meaningful to me because it was the first time that an organization without an agenda published this result. So the fact of the matter is that, unfortunately, in this world, there is a cultural bias that is ingrained in all of us from the time we're babies. And that this ingrained bias, often unconscious on the part of men and women, it's both, is impacting female founders and is impacting the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So the fact of the matter is that when you have 50% of the workforce, 50% of businesses getting started by female founders, and they're underserved by the venture market, that's an economic problem. Let's put fairness aside. Let's put morality aside. It's an economic problem, both for, the GDP, but also for the industries that need these innovation solutions. So, Dreamit, we're in healthcare, right? We're also in ed tech, and now we're in urban tech. These are big problems that need innovative solutions that can drive, accessibility to health or education or more efficacy. And when you have a major segment of the population that just isn't being serviced properly, it's a big problem. So I put together, Dreamit Athena to address both structural as well as some of these bias issues. Now, Athena is limited in what we can address at once, right? So I focused on 4 pillars, 2 structural, 2 what I call more personality trait. 2 structural are mentors, right? Let's put the female CTOs and CMOs and CFOs and and female founders out there as role models that, when someone thinks about, oh, I need guidance on PR, they're going to Gretchen or Cass or, that these people are front and center in mind. So role models is 1. 2 is access to capital. We're in much better shape today than we've ever been in terms of access to capital. I mean, you have, Female Founders Fund and Golden Seed. You have all these entities that address female founders, but we still need more mainstream VCs investing in female founders. The 2 personality-based issues that I, focused on addressing, the press likes to call it the confidence gap. I call it the bravado gap. The bravado gap is, I think, most easily exemplified by this experience that HP had. So HP put a program out in its workforce to explicitly develop more female managers. What they found when they studied things was when they put a role out there, a job, men applied when they had 6 of the 10 requirements for the job. Women applied when they had all 10. So in Dreamit Athena, we explicitly introduced what I called the 60% rule. Whatever you think 100% is, when you're 60% there, you go for it, right? So we as females tend to over-prepare, overdo. We're compensating for something, right? We just tend to be very thorough. And you don't, part of the core principles in the entrepreneurial world is execution. Get out and execute, right? And we execute well, but we tend to hold ourselves back until we feel like we're 100% there. So, in each of your minds, think 60% and go for it, okay? The second thing that I, addressed is multitasking. Women tend to be very, very good at multitasking. And they're like, oh, that needs to be done. I'll do that. That needs to be done. I'll do that. That needs to be done. I'll do that. The question is, should you be doing that? So men tend to be much more effective at going, this is what I'm going to focus on, and everything else, I'll hire or intern or whatever to address. And women tend not to do that. So it's that highest and best use focus. But as we talked about earlier, there's so many elements of unconscious bias out there that part of my goal is just to make people aware of these things. And if it's, I'm kind of rambling, but I'll tell this last story. A couple weeks ago, I was out to dinner with my brother and sister. And Mike and Mo. So we have a very energetic, passionate team at Dreamit. But I tend to get interrupted a lot in our meetings. And sometimes in our meetings, I feel like I'm a sprinter, like, And so, I've always had this awareness of I need to, interject and get my voice out there. And this isn't anything anybody's trying to do. It's just a very high, passionate energy environment. And I was kind of expressing to my brother and sister that, I need to figure out how to, address this situation, right? Because I feel like there's times where I really have to work very hard to get my voice out there. And my brother goes, oh, God, do we have to have this conversation again? Really? And I'm like, it's reality, right? So the very next day, an HBR study came out of the Supreme Court justices. And what they found is that the female Supreme Court justices get interrupted about 60% of the time. And that's not just with their peers, it's also with the advocates. And do you know how many times the female Supreme Court justices interrupt other people? Give me a number. 0. Oh, you guys know the answer. 0. The answer is 0, right? So what is it in our culture and our society that says it's okay to overtalk or interrupt women when we don't, right? And so these are the types of things that, if you're not aware of these tendencies, you can get easily beaten down and frustrated by them. The way I frame it out is people aren't trying to do this on purpose, right? It's just kind of part of the culture. So be explicitly aware and just say, wait, I'm talking here. I'm not done, right? And you don't do it out of anger. You're just like, wait, I've got a really great idea. You really want to listen to this. Stop and try to address it like that.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt you on that because I thought I knew that the stories and the anecdotes that you have are important, and they're real life examples of how, when you're in those environments, how to handle some of those situations. So I think that's tremendously important. Not rambling at all. I think it's great to have those stories come out, and I think that's very impactful. It's very impactful for our group. And personally, I think Dreamit Athena is doing great things, and I think that the pillars that you're focusing on are amazing, and I'm personally very pleased that that was launched here in Philadelphia. But Dreamit is even doing more things. So with the few minutes that we have to keep going of talking about what's the future for Dreamit, the future for you, and what's the future of your cast for vision in 30 seconds or less. You want to address all of those things? But specifically, we had talked about urban tech with Dreamit and how that's going and what the cast for the vision will be for Philadelphia included in that.
Yeah, so we're excited about our third vertical, which is urban tech, which is a combination of real estate tech, construction tech, and smart cities. And I think fundamentally this real estate is the oldest and the largest asset class in the country, and it's the least technically developed. And if you start thinking about what can happen in our lives, both personally and professionally, when there's data about how we're interacting with our either commercial or residential, real estate and the infrastructure in the city, that when there's actual data captured about how people interact with their physical environments, that, just imagine what can be done with that data and how that can impact our cities and our living. And the trend is that, more and more people are moving to urban centers. Cities have been growing dramatically. So there's a lot of opportunities both on kind of the physical real estate side, but then also on the infrastructure and how that gets managed and maximized. So we're excited to launch that vertical. We think it's going to have a big impact. We're doing the program in Tampa Bay because we're doing this in partnership with Jeff Vinnick, who has literally bought up half of Tampa Bay, and it's essentially a greenfield for commercial, residential, hotel, retail, hospitality, and so forth. But we'll be looking both to Philadelphia and New York City to leverage kind of the real estate networks in Mo, you tell me, have I gone off the rail? Am I good? Okay. That we'll be doing that. So, we're still very much, committed to what we're doing. Half our team, is in Philadelphia. So we continue and expect a big impact on the city with what we're doing.
That's great.
And we're raised, I can't say that.
And nothing.
We're going to be thinking about planning for raising our next fund, which we'll be targeting as a much bigger fund.
Since we're running short on time, I'm going to go into what we call our rapid fire questions. These are just sort of short questions, off the cuff answers, and then we'll open up the floor to questions. Mm-hmm. So, what's your biggest pet peeve?
Oh, God. Biggest pet peeve? People that talk more than do. Can't stand that.
That goes nicely with the motto of Dream It.
Yeah, but it's true.
Yeah.
Like people that know me personally, they're like, I'm like, okay, enough. Just go do something. Stop talking about it. You're driving me insane.
What was the last book that you read?
Oh, the last book. Well, so a girlfriend of mine writes mystery novels, so I just read her third book. So
What's the name of the book?
oh my god,
What's her name? What's her name? We'll do a plug.
you're laughing at me. K.L. Murphy is her book name, so I just read that to support her, the female writer.
Yes. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Such amazing support from the audience on that. Coffee or tea?
Diet Coke lime. Big gulps, morning, noon, and night. It's horrible.
So we'll get you a Diet Coke quickly. We'll open up the floor to questions now. If anybody wants to raise their hand, and we'll pass the microphone around. I'll start up front.
Yes, when you were in the venture capital phase, were you responsible for raising any funds?
So I'm still in the venture capital phase, but not purely venture capital. Yes, absolutely. I raised, David Bookspan and I basically raised the first Dreamit fund, and I'll be the lead on raising the next fund. Mm-hmm.
So when you're in venture capital, what was the one venture that didn't pan out? What one did you invest in that didn't work out?
Oh, there's been lots of failures. There's been lots of failures. The worst one was actually at Liberty Venture Partners when I was there. We backed a software company that had a foreign CEO, and he actually committed fraud and stole the money and went overseas. So that, was terrible because, I've always been early stage venture, and early stage, you have your hypothesis about what the business is, what the business model is, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work out. And it never works out according to the original vision. But here it was just out and out fraud, and that was just horrible. So then we had to go to court and chase this guy down, and it's not what you want to do.
Hi, Karen. I recently read an article that said, it was by a woman venture capitalist that said, women typically pitch businesses and men pitch unicorns. Do you find that? And how do you help women think about how they pitch and pitching a unicorn?
Yeah, it does tend to be true in the sense that I would phrase it differently, right? Women tend to be more realistic than men do. So men like to paint a big, big vision, and when you start diving in, how do you get from here to there? There's a lot of jazz hands involved, and you're like, women tend to be more realistic and more, kind of methodical. So I wouldn't say that there aren't big visions, but let's look at the reality of it, right? What percentage of companies are unicorns? Of all companies started, it's 0.00 whatever percent, right? So I just think it's not necessarily that women aren't pitching a big vision, they just tend to be a little bit more grounded.
My name is Jeff. That's actually, the jazz hands point is a good segue.
I'm scared now.
Well, tying back to your 60% rule,
Yeah.
that would seem to be, putting a lot of value on being fully prepared before taking the leap. But the 60% rule is probably good if you want to move quickly and get in position and keep things moving. But how much of what you're saying is gender specific, and how much of it is also cultural for, say, America versus a country like Germany?
Well, so we work with a lot of international entrepreneurs, but we really focus on business in the U.S. So I don't know how to answer that international question of yours. The thing is with the 60% rule is that there's a lot of implications around it, right? So let's think about it a little bit differently. Let's go back to my HP example, right? So when you have someone that says at 6 out of 10 qualifications, ooh, me, right? People around them might say, oh, they're not qualified yet, but guess what? They want to do that, right? So it starts building this self-fulfilling prophecy of they want to go here, so let's help them go here. And when women raise their hand at 10 out of 10 qualifications, they're already behind on a timeline basis, right? So the 60% rule is very different from the, jazz hands, big vision rule, because one is about, kind of putting yourself in position to where you want to go and putting yourself out there to go there. And the other is just saying, we're going to be huge and, we're going to do A, B, and get to Z, whereas women tend to be, A, B, C, D, maybe skip E and F and get to G, right? So it's a slightly different concept. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's just an interesting thought, content to idea.
And the fact of the matter is, look, if you look at entrepreneurs in general, right, male, female, no gender, one of the hardest things for any entrepreneur is to go out there and put their product out there for the first time, right? That's so hard. And so many entrepreneurs fail because either A, they have the mentality, I've got an idea, I build it, and they will come, or B, they want it perfect, and they're afraid to take that step to get it out there. So part of the 60% rule is also, no, you get more value by being out there and talking and getting feedback and input than you do being within and in your own head. So just go. We had one Dreamit, company, now this was extreme, this was a long time ago, that was a concept company that pursued an RFP to test out their idea and kind of their, did PowerPoint ware, and they won the RFP and they had no product, right? Oops, we better be up for a week, Cody. So it's the, the extremes in between. It's, the 60% rule is you go. You don't have 100% knowledge and you never will. You're not 100% prepared and you never will be. Just go.
Here, bring James, coming to you. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Jen. Thank you so much for bringing Dreamit's vision so that we could see it today. That was wonderful. Thank you very much. My question has to do with you are, and I believe it's a credible statement that on your website that you are the only, and I think the word was globally, you are the only worldwide entity that is a growth-focused healthcare or health sector incubator. And I'm very curious to know what your metrics are about that statement. Where is the distinction among that difference?
So for us, Dreamit's the third most established accelerator in the world, right? YC was first, Techstars was second, we were third. So, we recruit entrepreneurs nationally and internationally. So we have this expansive footprint. In 2015, we started looking at, where's the market need? And that's where we really looked hard at this pre-Series A, this Series A gap. And so we shifted our focus to pre-Series A. And so as a nationally and internationally oriented accelerator, we honed in on helping these companies that are post-seed achieve the metrics and milestones they need to achieve to successfully raise a Series A. We also fundamentally changed our offering, right, in how we worked with the companies. And so we were the first. We were the innovator in this focus. We were the innovator in our offering. So prior to that was like, you go into an accelerator and you get a stipend and then you give them 6 to 10% of your company. We completely changed that model. Now there's some programs that are starting to pick off elements of what we do in terms of our offering. No one does what we do operationally. No one. Because what we do, euphemistic we, what Mo and Mike at the back of the room do, no other accelerator program does.
Thank you for putting some words around it. It's amazing, great insight.
One final question, anyone? Here you go.
Yeah, I'm just curious. About 2 years ago, I presented at the PACT meeting, and they made the comment that 90% of entrepreneurs from UPenn were going to New York and Boston, and it sounds like you're a real protagonist of Philadelphia. And your thoughts on the venture community coming here and the future of health technology here, with companies staying, I mean.
Okay, that was a lot of questions, one
Oh,
question. So yes, we tend to work with a lot of companies coming out of Penn. Really great tech, especially in healthcare, and we work closely with Penn Medicine. We're big fans of the region, and we have actually launched more startups in this region than any other entity. But at the same time, we're proponents about what makes the most sense for entrepreneurs, right? So if it makes sense for them to be at a different geography, given their business, then we're not going to argue that. Healthcare makes sense here. Ed tech makes sense here. And, we're thinking that urban tech will make sense here. So, our goal, and we've stated from the beginning, we can attract the best companies here. We can help them build their foundational elements. We can't keep them here, right? So the community as a whole has to support these entrepreneurs. Now, what I think is that the community of entrepreneurs here is really strong. I mean, anybody I talk to universally that comes to Philadelphia says, oh my God, like everybody's so open and willing to help you, right? I think that's a definite strength that this region has, that our ecosystem is so supportive of one another. Obviously, we have strengths in the healthcare industry. We don't have as much risk capital as other regions have. And that's a big challenge that we have. So why do companies go to New York? There's a lot more capital in New York than there is. And that's, a fundamental challenge that this region faces, is that there is a lot of wealth in this region, but it tends to be preservation wealth versus risk capital wealth. And we need more risk capital wealth here in the region.